Good morning all from the UK. I appreciate that not all of you are here, so it will be good afternoon for some. My name's Jimmy Beale. I am from the English Education in India. Welcome to our webinar where we're going to be looking at the value of a great UK boarding school education for girls, and with a particular slant for girls who come to the UK from India. During the webinar, we'll be looking at a whole range of things: academic standards, placements after university, who looks after your children, what they do at school, how often they can go home, all sorts of things. There will be plenty of opportunity to ask questions, more of that in a second. Before introducing you to our esteemed panel, who will be the heart of this session, may I welcome all our guests. We have people registered from various cities in India, as well as from other countries as well. So that'll it's a good mix, and I hope you'll find the session very informative. A bit of boring housekeeping, if I may, before we start. Bar the panelists, all of you will have your video and your sound turned off. But as said before, you are more than welcome to ask questions. There is a panel bar to the side. Those questions will be fed in and somehow got to me by my colleague Katie. So we'll answer questions possibly even throughout the webinar, but certainly at the end. The webinar is being recorded and will be available, sent to you all after the session. So it's now time to introduce our panelists. First of all, my partner at the English Education in India, Pooja Talwar. Pooja, perhaps you could mention briefly a bit of background about the English education and
yes,
what
of course.
what families look to us for. Pooja.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So Jimmy and Janie and our third part. Janie Richardson, Jimmy and I started the English education in India early 2022. We've been helping families from Mumbai, mostly from Mumbai and Delhi, but also Indian families living in America, Dubai and Singapore, get some fabulous placements for their children. I'm a parent of the British boarding school system, and I don't think there's a better education you can give your child. It's the most well-rounded education you can receive. The advantages for us who live in India and have to travel places for things is that you'll have everything under one roof, be it your music, your sport, your academics, and your extracurriculars like drama and debate. You learn to give things a go that you never get a chance to in India. Maybe you always wanted to debate, maybe you wanted to play netball and you never had a chance to. And the beauty of it all is most Indian families do look at the US university platform, and to build your CV for US university, there's so much you do at school that you really don't need to be running around to do things. And we've seen that it's a great pathway to amazing, apart from Oxbridge, great US and other European universities. I'll hand you back over to Jimmy to introduce Samantha and Eve.
Thanks so much. I think it's worth making the point that actually most of our families for the English education in India have been looking at 13 plus, many at 16 plus, but so far, limited sample size, but more boys than girls. And we are so keen to extol the virtues of a fabulous single-sex girls' education here in the UK, with the hope that parents pick this up and think, yeah, this is something we really, really must do. So yes, our experts from the schools. We're joined by Eve, Jardine-Young, headmistress at Cheltenham Ladies College, and Samantha Price, headmistress of Beneden School. Both of them are leading highly rated girls-only schools for girls aged between 11 and 18. Between them, and to spare their blushes, they've worked for more than a couple of years in a variety of roles at a number of super schools. And importantly, they have a great deal of experience of leadership within super boarding communities. Welcome to you both. And thank you so much for giving up your time at the start of another busy week and an especially busy term. So to the questions to the panel, it'll be a bit of Q&A, but please, as I say, do feed in your own questions if you wish, throughout. So my first question is to Eve, please, and this is the big one. Why is a girls' only education here in the UK such a fab option?
Thank you, Jimmy, and to all of you, welcome. It's a great opportunity to be speaking with you today. Jimmy, I'm in danger of talking passionately for too long, so I'll give you just a short version of what probably warrants a much fuller conversation. Both Sam and I have worked in co-ed schools in the UK as well as girls only. And therefore, I think it's important to set that context in terms of we're speaking from not from a hypothetical situation, but from having worked in both. And what I would say is there are outstanding co-ed schools as well. Not the answer you might expect me to open with on a webinar designed to champion the merits of single sex, but what, and I hope, Sam, I'm speaking for both of us, what we don't feel has any place in the modern world is a shrill hysteria that is on the defensive about girls, girls, girls. There was a time where that narrative felt, better when they're away. And there was something about the detriment, the negative, the tone. What we believe in passionately, and we see more and more with every passing year, is that our young people live and socialise online in a co-educational connected space anyway. The 1980s and the 1990s world of separating people physically and entirely from each other is something of a thing of the past. So to answer your question explicitly, Jimmy, what we've now got is the most phenomenal set of schools who have over time have really optimized their deep understanding around the personal development and growth of young women, the physical, social, emotional and psychological stages and phases that accompany different ages and different transitions of life. And we have a very uninhibited landscape within which to talk about issues that not only affect the world, all of us, but specifically women and girls. And there are still important conversations to be had about that.
I'm fascinated by the uninhibited landscape. Father of daughters myself. Tell me more about that and the openness.
So, Jimmy, I think what did strike me was that and forgive me referencing co-ed a little bit more than you might have expected me to.
No, that's important.
I think it's really important, isn't it, Pooja, that I would be advocating for the best possible educational experience for your child. And if you believe that's co-ed, I'm not going to sit here and throw coconuts at it. Your parents will know their children. What they may have is a feeling or a worry about what the worst of an all-female environment could feel like, what it might feel like at its worst. What are we like at our worst as women? There might be ideas there around, bitching or slightly small screen thinking or unkindness to each other. Well, having been a house mistress in a co-ed school for a number of years, if girls are determined to be unkind to each other, they will do so in a co-ed school. The presence of boys is not an inherent immunity to unkindness to each other. It's just a nonsense.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
So what we find to return to this feeling of this uninhibitedness, Jimmy, is that even when you have enlightened young men, brothers, sons, all those wonderful, and I'm sure we all know them. My goodness, I taught them for years. They are wonderful company. But sometimes, even in the most benign environments, their sheer presence and what they might be thinking, what judgments they might be making, and the self-consciousness that one inevitably has in adolescence as to the presence of people of the opposite sex, presents a slightly greater potential for the girls to self-inhibit.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily that they're being bullied and intimidated by these horrible boys. These are negative stereotypes that we don't want to build a narrative. We don't build our narrative on that. What we have is girls who actually, in the absence of that dynamic and energy, and in the ethos of our schools that for decades has built open, supportive, inclusive environments where we encourage debate and challenge, we encourage the voices to be heard, and we encourage deep listening of each other. The deep listening can only develop in its quality if people are actually speaking to be heard. So the richness of your dialogue and the quality of your peers who educate each other actually is a function of your overall school culture. And I would argue that my challenge might be to invert your original question, Jimmy, and say, prove to me that it's better to be somewhere other than a single-sex girls' school if you have a daughter.
I'm not going to do that right now, nor is it my intention or desire to. What I'm going to do is beautifully, and I get that, but you've asked me a really difficult question, and when asked a difficult question, I like to deflect. So, Sam, do you to follow up on the same question? Do you have anything to add as an adjunct there, please?
Well, I was just, hello everybody, very, very nice to see you. And Jimmy, thank you very much for inviting me to join this conversation. I was just thinking about my son actually, who's in year 10 and he's at a co-ed school. And I don't know how the girls cope with having him in classrooms and so on. He's going to blossom into a beautiful young man. But at the moment, he's just not quite there at the moment. So I would protect the girls from him probably. I think that being in as Eve has said, we've both been in co-ed at its very, very best, as well as girls' schools at its very best too. And I think that ultimately, when you're choosing a school for your child, you've got to be driven by, I think, the ethos of the school, whether the values of the school actually really resonate with your family's values, and whether when you look at the older students, whether you feel that those older students are the type that you'd like your child to grow into. So I actually make that the driving factor, rather than whether actually it's a single sex or a co-ed school. However, what I would advise all parents looking to do is to, within their group that they are sort of visiting of schools, to have a co-ed and a single sex in there, so they can actually really compare, as opposed to sort of having a preconception as to I've got to have this type, and come and see what it's like at its best. So that would be my addition to that.
Well, that's super, and from our perspective, we do get a lot of families coming to us uncertain. And as we always say, and it could be a question later on I'm sure from people, is that you've just got to go and look around the school, because it's only when you go and look at the school and you look at the reactions between boys and girls, staff and boys and girls, that you actually say, this is where I would like my child to be. We're going to move on. Thank you very much for that. The super answers to that big question. Pooja, your question next, please.
Yes, I have a question actually, and we'll begin with Sam on this one. So Sam, when the girls arrive, especially I'm talking the international students, what sort of induction or welcome program might a boarder expect? And how quickly do you think they settle in, especially if they haven't been in an all-girls environment before? Because we don't have too many, the more modern schools in India are not single-sex anymore.
Okay, so I mean, first of all, I think that the welcome starts way before any child actually arrives at the school, and that induction. So, and what you'll find with the majority of boarding schools, but I think particularly the girls' schools actually over here, is that there will be a remote induction. So you've been offered your place a few months before arriving. It's very likely that you'll have a webinar, which will provide the opportunity for the house staff, for the house mistresses or house masters, to be able to talk about their houses. They may even get some students to actually walk around the house and sort of show the pupils different areas and dorms, etc. and then allow that to then develop into a Q&A session. And that, I think, is really affirming for parents, because it gives them the chance to be able to engage with the school before they've actually got here. And parents have got to have that chance to be able to ask all of those questions about school uniform, about how much to bring. I mean, one of the key things, of course, is, don't pack too many home clothes, because your daughter's style will change very quickly as soon as she arrives at the school. So sort of save that for maybe half term, or how many coat hangers, etc. So it's just giving that scope. Then linking up, all schools here will link students up with an older student in our content. You may call them a big sister, you may call them a mentor, whatever happens to be, who will get in touch with them, again, sort of via Zoom or WhatsApp, or they'll write to them. And again, you get that relationship going. There will always be an induction actually physically at the school, which will be in the summer term, just before the students are coming in the September. We always encourage, where possible, overseas students to come in for that induction day. It's a great opportunity for them to all meet each other. They will all spend time in the boarding houses. Their parents can meet each other as well. And that's when they exchange all their sort of contacts, which is a great way, I think, to go away at the end of that summer term, sort of building up for the start of the autumn term. I do think it's really worth, before you arrive in September, flying over, if you can, with your daughter as a parent, or with your son as a parent, depending on what sort of school you're going to, and being there to be able to drop them into school physically yourselves too. And all schools will have a really, really sort of big welcome for new students and their families. Depending on the school, you might find the new students come in a bit earlier than the other students, so they again can settle before the rest of the school arrives. There's often a gathering. Now that might be a sort of a Christian service, or it might just be a sort of a gathering of reflection in schools when you're welcoming formally all of the new students who are coming in, chance to meet senior staff, etc. So I think that for parents is as affirming as it is for the pupils as well. And I do think that if you literally just land and you go straight into the school, I think you're sort of getting over the travel, you're having to adjust, etc. too, and I think that can sometimes be quite challenging. In terms of guardians, and I know Eve is going to sort of add into this as well. A lot of schools do everything they can to connect with guardians remotely, so that guardians feel that they are part of the school, particularly if you're a parent who can't be coming over regularly, and the guardian's going to be really important to you. A Zoom connection between the house and the guardian, inviting the guardians, if they'd like to come into the school and to meet with the school, is really, really helpful. And it helps us to be able to provide as much support as we can, obviously, for the girls, particularly during the induction, but also sort of during their journey whilst they're at your school as well. I've probably done my 4 minutes, because I think that's what I was allocated. So I'm going to sort of, I know Eve's got 2 minutes, so I'm going to sort of, Eve, if you would like to sort of finish up once that first day, we've done the initial induction, we can sort of go into that last bit once the girls actually arrived.
Sure, Sam, thank you. Gosh, you did such a magnificent job. I was then nodding away. Yes, absolutely. I think probably what I'd also add 2 things. One, amongst the many painful things that COVID brought us to our lives on there's a very long list, isn't there? And it's still going on. There were some good things that came of it, that came of our response to dealing with it. And one of them we're benefiting from right now is the ease with which we can jump together to connect across the miles. So, Sam, you and I have run and lived and worked in boarding schools for decades, and the geographical separation is always something that an international boarding family will be very thoughtful about. The better your educational options are at home, the more you have to be persuaded that there's something even better, that it is worth being separated from your child for. And I'm speaking from the heart here as somebody who, as a boarder, actually came to the UK for my sixth form at 16 plus way back in 1988. So I turned 50 this summer, and I'm back in the day where there was no internet, no Facebook, no nothing, that separation was quite daunting. And it required a commitment from all sides, and schools did not have good induction processes, may I say, without being too critical of my predecessors. We have become now so respectful and mindful of the fact that this is a family decision, not just about a child. The whole family's life changes when you choose your school for your child, doesn't it? Because your holiday dates are now determined by the school, you know, all of this kind of stuff. So what we're thinking about is, what does this whole family need, not just what does this child need? And also, sometimes people get a bit overwhelmed with the tsunami of information at the beginning. So we think now about induction as being a lot beforehand, you know, flatten the curve really as much as you can beforehand. The inevitable, right, we're now launching at the beginning, and then let's return half term, Christmas, you know, throughout that first year, just to see, let's not just assume after one day that you know everything. Now you know what you didn't know, and most of our schools now will talk to the girls to say, what did we not tell you? What should we have said? What did we forget to tell you? So a lot of it is shaped by that iterative feedback as well.
I think, I mean, that's great. I think the next question, I was going to ask an academic question, but I'm not. I'm going to go back to that theme, if I may, and slightly jig around the order. I think the role of the friend, the house mistress, who is that first point of contact in your schools for the girl who is doing all of that wraparound care. I mean, I know it's the whole community, but there is going to be one person picking up that responsibility, and parents need to know. Could you tell me about the role of probably house mistress, house master? Perhaps Sam, you could do that one to start with.
Yes, and again, the role of the house mistress, house master will change or be different depending on the model of the schools. So in some schools, you have a sort of traditional house mistress master who also teaches an academic subject. In other schools, they've evolved more towards the house parent, who doesn't teach and takes on a bit more of a matron role. So that piece, just to be aware of in terms of structural difference. On the whole, though, it's going to be your house mistress or your house master who is that immediate point of contact in conjunction with matron as well. So they are very much a team. You'll find that the house mistress will be out of the house sort of for parts of the day. That's when the matron is always going to be present as well. Then you'll have a deputy housemaster mistress too. So between those 2 to 3 people, they will feature very strongly in your daughter's lives, and they will be the person who you will be emailing, particularly if you have a concern. Your daughter will also have a tutor, and again, it depends again on the structure of the school, but it's likely that in a boarding school, they'll meet their tutor once a week, have time sort of with them. The tutor will be attached to the boarding house, and therefore, as a parent, you'll be liaising with tutor, with parent, house mistress as well. Sometimes it's going to be around the dynamic and the person that your daughter feels most comfortable talking to, and she will quickly identify that person. Sometimes it might be the person, the adult that you build up sort of the quickest rapport with as well. I think one thing I would just point of caution is if your daughter, particularly if she's joining sort of at 13 and it's the end of the day and she's feeling a bit weary and perhaps her sugar levels are a bit low and she speaks to you and she gets teary, please just be reassured that she will be scooped up very quickly. You might be left on the end of the phone feeling pretty desperate, but actually you'll probably find that 10 minutes later she's giggling away with friends. That's where it's very useful to have some contact with the house, because they can then just reassure you that honestly she's absolutely fine.
That's absolutely super, and I don't think Eve we need, because I know the systems are the same in that school. Super, thank you, Sam. Eve, can I ask a question about academics, please, or about academics and curriculum? Is the curriculum different in a girls only school?
Curriculums vary, but not by the gender mix of the school, I would say, Jimmy. So short answer is yes and no. most websites now should, if they're worth their salt, give you really good information about what curriculum is available for which year groups. And certainly I think you can rely absolutely on a fairly predictable list of core subjects: English, maths, triple science, humanities, and so on. Where there's some interesting variations in the margins are exactly what suite of modern languages, what something like classics, Latin, Greek, classical civilizations, those will vary. And also a little bit about dual award science or all three separate sciences to GCSE, a little bit of variety there according to different schools' provisions. We happen to have actually quite a large sixth form of 300 in total size, about 150, 160 in each year group, which is large enough to support us being able to provide the IB and A-levels as parallel alternative programs, and lots and lots of advice for individuals on how to choose. So what we would say, and Sam, I imagine you would be in agreement here, is if you look at the uptake, voluntary uptake, so beyond 13, where this is what you're studying, here's your timetable, into what subjects would you like to do? When people have the choice, uptake of subjects, particularly STEM, where on the national and international picture, boys are in the dominance and girls tend to be in the minority, those subjects in single-sex girls' schools are thriving. The numbers are very significant.
I think that's what I really in my head was trying to unpick. And Sam, if maybe you could go on to, I'll put it out there, the old view of all girls' schools teaching subjects that only girls will do, and they won't have access to the sciences and engineering. Sam, tell me that that's completely wrong. I know it is, but...
No, it is complete. There's no subject bias in girls' schools at all. In fact, we've just been going through in my school for next year, the options are upper fifth again. And just to reiterate really what Eva said, but science and maths are way ahead in terms of the girls' A-level choices, actually to the detriment of humanities and languages. So we are actually sort of tasking humanities to sort of try and fight back against science and get a bit of competition going across faculties. I think creative technologies is becoming hugely popular. Girls are really creative, and they have a real appetite for innovation as well. And now that their confidence in the schools, the schools are building confidence with technology. I think we're all beginning to really see how the girls are sort of starting to link the creativity to the technology, and actually increasingly using AI as well, and sort of really looking in terms of their careers and how they're going to use technology. And there's that appetite there, which actually, if I'm honest with you, when I started as a boarding head of a girls' school sort of over 10 years ago, there wasn't that appetite there at all. So it's been really exciting to see that trajectory develop.
That's super.
Okay, and if I may add, I have to say, I know of a number of girls from all Indian girls from all girls schools who've actually gone on to read exactly these subjects at university and done brilliantly. Yeah, exactly. And girls work really hard as well, and which I think we all know. But with girls, it's about confidence and this just belief that they can do something. And of course, sort of going back to the first question around why an all-girls school, I think that just when you've got sixth form role models who are doing science and aspiring for engineering and wanting to be doctors and using AI, and you're 11, 12, 13, and you're really bright and motivated, you just look at that and you think, wow, this is so exciting, and you want to start doing that yourself. So it's the role modeling that you get in girls' schools for younger girls, I think, is absolutely second to none, and it's really inspiring.
Super, super, super answer. Pooja, could you pick up on the next question? Is that all right?
Yes. Why do you feel that young ladies make such good pupils at your school? I know it's taken from the last question, but would you like to add anything more to that
I think
either Sam
specifically
or
young Indian ladies.
young Indian ladies make such fine pupils. Why do you feel? And I know you both had them, and be nice for the Indian parents on this webinar to hear that why, because we know that schools in the UK are increasingly looking towards getting more pupils from India at their schools. And we love that. We call it the India Shining moment. But it would be nice for us to hear from both of you, and we can start with Eve, that what it is about in the Indian pupils that you like having them at your school.
Thank you, Pooja. I mean, we have such a variety of personalities, I would say, amongst them, that it's quite an interesting challenge to try to think about that general characterization. I think Sam has already mentioned hardworking, that sort of work ethic, which, you know, seems to come very naturally. And there's on the whingeometer, on the moaning, you know, there's quite a low score on moaning and victimhood. It's like, well, you know, our parents gave this amazing opportunity, of course we're going to work, you know.
yeah
Not a lot less sort of self-pity, oh dear, woe is me, you know, which is always a joy for the staff. But I think if I may perhaps just very briefly, in interest of time, but indulge myself in remembering two wonderful Indian pupils who were very different to each other, but maybe would give you an answer to this question. My very first year in the post, September 2011, the deputy head of school was a girl who'd just been appointed to that role called Kasturi Shah, who came from Mumbai. Now, she'd actually joined the college in year 10, so about 14 years old. And she was doing the IB and she wanted to apply to Princeton, and she did, and was successful, and she's now doing sort of PhD astrophysics, goodness knows what.
Wow.
But the girl I remember was the one who said, you know, I've grown up in India, and it's sometimes when you go away from your country and your family and you look back at them and at yourselves from a distance, usually, you know, parents were very well traveled. I've been here, I've been there. I felt I'd seen them. But actually, when you live away and you look back, she said, you see different things. And so she said, when, you know, I come through the streets of Mumbai all my life, but when I came back from having been here for a term, I saw with different eyes the difference between absolute poverty and relative poverty. I thought about rural and urban poverty differently. I thought about informal and formal things like housing and the labour force and you know, because that's also part of being older and having had a more academic, you know, maturity. But she was able to come in and out of her own country and see the social, the economic, the political landscape and rich dynamic life of that with a different lens, which was additive and not substitutional. And that ability to be those people, I think, Pooja, who, you know, who come from communities that are strong. I grew up in Malawi in Central Africa as an expat kid. And, you know, I remember being invited to a Hindu wedding of my best friend's older sister when I was about 14. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. It's just like amazing, extraordinary experience. But, you know, I just felt community. People, there is love, there is generosity, there is help, there is care, there is thought, there is empathy as default. Now, that is not the case everywhere in the world. I have to say, it's just not the case. And what the Indian students that I've seen and known over the years are often people who bring then to a boarding environment very, very natural reflexes. They understand community. They understand what it is to give to it, but also to be a responsible member of it. And cherish the importance that sometimes you have to do stuff that you don't always enjoy for the good of the whole. And if the whole is strong, everybody within the whole has a better, psychologically safer and kinder experience. So it's that
Yeah.
sense of responsibility. And my experience of Indian students is they bring a lot of motivation, ambition, and ideas, but there's that deep rootedness in community, in family, in identity that never leaves them and makes us a richer school.
You're absolutely right, because all the Indian students I've seen they come with the idea that they want to assimilate themselves into the school. They want to sort of imbibe the value system and yet have a wonderful sharing of ideas. Sam, would you like to add to what Eve had to say?
I think Eve has really, really eloquently sort of summed up really what I would say as well. I think that the Indian students that we've had here over the years have brought such a richness actually to our own culture and been very quickly respected. Yes, the girls on the whole, and it's a real generalization here, but on the whole, yes, the girls do work. They really value education. They really value the opportunities that they're being given, but they have very strong personal values, and they tend to be quite gentle in how they communicate those values. And I think that gentleness, but also that steeliness within them is something that the girls actually really respect. And quite unconsciously or undeliberately, they end up becoming quite quickly leaders within their boarding house environments as well. So I think we always welcome applicants from India.
Super.
That's wonderful. And in fact, Sam, just to let you know, we actually have an old Beneden girl she graduated in 1988, and she's with us on the webinar, there to cheer her school on. And we also have actually a Beneden parent whose daughter has done brilliantly well, and she's doing biochemical engineering at Columbia today. So, I mean, we have amazing examples from both the girls' schools that we have in our country. So thank you for that.
What a lovely round of dance, and thank you to both. I'm going to ask the next question of Samantha to start with, please. What do you want your international boarders to take away from their time at your school?
It's a really, really good question. To a certain extent, I would like our international boarders to take away what our national boarders do, which is that sort of understanding, first of all, of themselves, that respect for community, which I think is what you get from boarding in spades. Yes, really, really good, strong academic outcomes and going on to universities that you should be going on to. But really, I think sort of within that, to immerse yourself within the communities that we have here in our schools, to really make the most of all of the co-curricular opportunities. And I think to make those lasting friendships, which are going to sort of hold with you for life. I think what our international students do is they provide, again, just to go back to the last question, they do provide a global richness to our communities within the schools. And I think, you know, we're in a world which is very, very small, actually. We can travel from A to B to C very quickly. We can communicate online with each other very quickly, but actually being able to understand each other and understand each other's cultures in a way that can actually sort of make a real difference in the future is incredibly important. So I think I want our girls to go away with that understanding of, yes, the UK and the UK perspective, but actually to bring their global perspective to our schools, so that actually when our students leave and go on to leadership positions, which the majority of them do in all sorts of different walks of life, they're going to go into those positions with a genuine empathy and to be able to lead in a really inclusive manner and in a way that's going to be kind and make the world better. And I think that the more that we can have a sort of a diverse richness within our schools to be able to create that environment, the better it is for the world's future.
Super.
Super.
Eve, anything to add?
Thanks, Jimmy. Again, it sounds like the mutual appreciation show of me and Sam, doesn't it? Sorry, Sam. It's just
we know each other quite well.
But it's also, we don't see each other very often. So we don't tend to hear each other's actual, you know, genuinely heartfelt thoughts on things that often. So thank you for the slight extension there. Jimmy, I think all of what Sam has said, I would endorse wholeheartedly. Maybe three other little thoughts that occurred to me, which again apply to the national borders as well. So it's boarding full stop, wherever your parents might be. But there's a lot of debate at the moment around what actually is a British school, what is a British education. Because actually, if you look at the multicultural, multi-ethnic nature of modern Britain, you know, the days of the sort of somebody's white or somebody's not white, I mean, we are just decades past this, decades. And there's a lot of discourse at the moment, isn't there, triggered often by a scandal or something awful somebody has said about identity and about almost Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's TED talk about the danger of a single story, about the danger of us seeing each other in the caricature of a cardboard cutout of one identity. You are a woman, or you are Indian, or you are Hindu, or you are Muslim, or you are Sikh, or you are Christian, or I'm nothing, you know.
Yeah.
But sometimes we're all of those things in different facets of our life. And something that I think boarding and international board, particularly international boarders, benefit from is ultimately, if you come to Britain to receive a British education, the fundamental British values of democracy, rule of law, freedom of speech, liberal thinking, etc., that actually, if you have a school in Britain, you are required by law to uphold those things. It's not an option. We have to deliver those things. What happens is you get exposed to a true diversity of perspective. Diversity of perspective. And having grown up in a country where I was at my formative years in school with a very, very multicultural population of composition of the school, Indian, Malawian, Greek, Zimbabwean, South African, you name it. I imagine countries with a lot of expats in them. This is not uncommon in the local day schools, whether they're the British schools, the American schools, the French schools, the Canadian schools. There is a lot of multiculturalism, but when you live in a country, it is that country's values which provide the context for the school to deliver its curriculum. So Jamie, coming to Britain into one of our schools means that the freedom of speech, which can be very scary and very harsh and very ugly at times, we know that's the price you pay for the freedom. But as the adults, as the leaders of civic life of the future, as the people who are going to be the potential to lead our neighbourhoods, our families, our citizens, our NGOs, our multicultural organisations, our political lives, we need people to be exposed, not like hothouse orchids where it's all been desanitised and people are either terribly courteous and polite to you all the time, or they're trolls on the internet and they're terribly nasty people. Actually, the reality of life and business lies in between those two. And it's hard to navigate. So what I think you get when you come to a boarding school in the UK, co-ed or single sex, is you are exposed to a diversity of opinion without any political overlay of an autocratic regime or a regime that doesn't really want freedom of the press or doesn't permit genuine expression of difference. And those things subliminally feed into what gets asked, questions get asked in a politics lesson. They feed into what questions get asked in an IB ethics and philosophy lesson. It feeds into how well prepared you are for a Cambridge law interview, right? Or Brown or Harvard coming to interview you for a liberal arts program. So when I came out of Malawi, which at the time, Hastings Banda was the life president, and it had been politically very, very stable, but under one life president, we'd never had a vote. I could not, it took me 15 years as somebody with a British passport to acclimatise to Britain in its civic life. And Jimmy, the culture shock it's not always as obvious as it might seem, is it? But I have therefore got a deep respect for the difference between, you know, a school that can give you fabulous qualifications, a wonderful education, many happy memories and great friends. This can give you that and something that is deeper, more profound, and actually, I believe, sets you up for self-sufficiency, resilience in the workplace, and a true ability to be globally nomadic, either temporarily or permanently, through your business dealings, your choice of where you live or end up traveling, in a way, or who comes to you and you have to deal with them in a way that I think is hard to replicate in a day school experience.
Fabulous answer.
Okay, fabulous.
From both.
Super. Yeah.
Thank you so much. There are some questions coming in, and I'm going to fire those out towards you. We're probably together for another 10 or so minutes. A question's come in. Communication with parents. If I'm on the other side of the world, who's going to get in touch with me? It may seem like the minutiae, but someone's thinking it. Sam, would you pick up on that one, please?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm an anxious parent, and I need to know more.
Okay, so I'll be very operational here. The first sort of point of contact, as we talked about before, would be sort of picking up the phone to the boarding house and sending an email through to the boarding house. And there will always be somebody on duty. All schools have a policy whereby, sort of depending on the level of the staff you're trying to access, if it's a member of the teaching staff and they've got an anxiety there, you will always get a response within 24 hours. If it's within the boarding house, you will always get a response within a couple of hours, although, as I said, there'll be somebody there if you're needing them. So from that point of view, you will never feel that you are trying to contact a black hole when you need to find out how your daughter is doing. And from that point of view, you won't feel that you're at the other side of the world at all. And I think, as Eva's also sort of mentioned, during COVID, one of the things that we started to do is we could have Zoom meetings very easily. So almost every parent now, even as the head that I will speak to, it'll be a Zoom or a Teams meeting. It won't just be a telephone call, and that just makes you feel more connected to that person. I suppose on a broader level, you're going to get weekly updates coming through from the school. Just generally, we've all got just weekly newsletters, and you include photographs in those as well. If your daughter is very musical and she's in a concert, you'll find that schools are recording those concerts. Those links are then sent out. They might be live streaming them. Increasingly, you've got live streaming so that you can feel that you're part of that. So if your daughter's performing in a concert, you can gather your family and friends around at your house, and you can actually watch her live and be part of that. And that's really special. And then parent-teacher meetings, you're finding that those increasingly are being we use a platform called School Cloud. So they're all online. You get a few minutes with each teacher, with a tutor as well, and that's a really effective way of being able to keep in communication with your daughter's teachers. So I would say, and going back to my boarding days, or going back to when I started in boarding, I think the level of communication now is absolutely phenomenal between schools and families, and again, that's where our world is actually very small. You can be thousands of miles away, and you can still really know your daughter's school and the people who are looking after her.
That's fantastic. I think, having worked in schools myself, I think it's very important that parents know, if it is a really important thing, that communication will happen straight away, whether it's a health issue, a safety issue, then someone will be contacting you straight away. And you would always be rest assured. That's why schools need guardians, in case the hours are odd and you may be away from your home. That's why you must have a guardian, why boarding schools insist upon it. Thanks for that answer. One, please, to a question that's come in. Do girls from your schools go to UK or US universities? Wow, that's quite specific. I suspect, as we know, many Indian families wish their girls to go on to UK, it's not US universities.
It's university.
No. Eve.
Thanks, Jimmy. So if I give, rather than give you sort of any 1 year snapshot,
Yeah.
cohorts differ, don't they? But we've recently done the last 12 years aggregation, so looking at well over 1,000 leavers to see what en masse does that look like, and out of 1,400 leavers in total over that time, 75% of our girls decided in the end to go to a UK-based university, so 3/4 are going to UK. The other quarter, so 25%, have gone to university in 18 other different countries.
Okay.
The largest of those by some distance is to the USA. So in Western world, you've got 18 represented, but US and then probably Canada are the biggest two destinations.
Super. I think, I was a university's advisor, head of sixth form many years ago, and we didn't do it well enough. All my experiences recently, that great boarding schools are really paying attention to this and making sure that the advice and proper counselling is done for those who wish to go to universities elsewhere. Great. I'm going to see if I can get another couple of questions in. This is a nice question. How often do international girls go home? Sam?
Yeah. It entirely depends. I would say that generally speaking, international students, they'll all go home for the 3 main holidays. That would be sort of the UK, Christmas, Easter, and during the summer. There tends to be a 2-week half term in October, and I would say that the majority of my overseas or international students will go home for that 2-week half term. Then you have a week in February and you have a week in May for the spring and the summer half terms. And that's the one which is debatable. Some pupils will stay in the UK, maybe with friends or guardians, and quite often families will come over to the UK as well, particularly if they can. They'd like to touch base with their daughter's school and if there's an event going on too. So on average, you could be going home every 6 weeks if it suited the family too, which, to be honest with you, isn't really very long at all.
Pooja, thank you, Sam. Your own experiences having been a parent over here, and your friends?
Very similar, actually. Most families came home, the students came home for the 3 large holidays, like you said, Easter, summer, and Christmas. And it was normally during, we have school holidays here in May. So families are normally over. They love being around in the summer term. They love visiting schools, seeing how their children are doing. They like to go to sports fixtures or watch a concert that their daughter or son will be performing at. And they actually, sometimes some children come home at the February half term. Alternately, a lot of parents like to fly in and maybe do a short holiday in Europe at that time. So that's what we normally see. It just depends on the year group and the family. But I think the joke is you have your friends saying, your child is back. Didn't they just leave? So they're back often enough, sometimes too often. So
that's super. Well, I think all our experiences so far is that when mums and daddies drop their children off in those first weeks, they expect to see their children every weekend, and then suddenly their children will be saying, "No, not this weekend, mum," because there are better things to be doing, and that's something that families themselves have to get used to. My last question. This one is to Eve. Do girls at your school have to play sport? My daughter hasn't played much and she's 10 years old. I'd like her to join a new school when she's 13.
Great, Jimmy, thank you. So just to set the scene on the number of girls we've got and what this approach to sport is, we have 880 pupils. We take about 80 at 11. We take another 30 to 40 girls at 13, and then another 40 to 50 in the sixth form. So we have significant points of entry at 11 and 13 and 16. So in terms of as those girls all arrive from many different schools, their experience of sport up until that point is really varied. But, you know, there's much more similarity of what maths you've studied by the time you're 12 or 13 than what sports you've been doing, to be honest, when you have got families coming from 40 different countries, and even within the UK coming from many different feeder schools, not just from a small catchment in a day area. So about 8 years ago, we had a big review of sport, because when you look at public health, medical advice about lifelong health, your relationship with exercise, for women in particular, there is some very compelling studies that have been done around the effect of positive experiences of school sport leading to much bigger likelihoods of, when you're an adult, maintaining some kind of exercise. So whether it's yoga, it doesn't have to be sort of running a marathon, but what you have found makes you happy or makes you feel better, you will hold on to it in your later life. Where your experience of sport at school has been pretty awful, or for some people it's marvelous because it all seems to come naturally. For other people, I put myself in this other category. It's like, oh my goodness, please don't hit the ball to me, because I'll probably miss it. And all the pressure to kind of catch and throw properly. So people are very different. So one of the huge things, again, me circling elliptically back to the very first question about the benefits of single-sex girls, sport is probably the area where there is the most powerful benefit for there not being any boys here. Because every single blade of grass, every single square centimetre of a sports hall that any of our schools have is devoted for girls to do sport, girls. And they're not competing for the space with the boys. They don't have the worry of, what do I look like? Do I look undignified in my tracksuit, in my swimming costume, in my blah, blah, blah? Because they're just not there. And because we've got so many girls, all different shapes and sizes and levels of physical literacy, it's a very broad church, and it's very, very, again, very tolerant, very positively framed. So our sports programs here, we have 18 different kinds of sport. We have 2 big sports halls. We have a fantastic dance program. Girls play golf. They do lacrosse, netball, tennis, swimming, water polo, normal polo, equestrian, horse riding, fencing, running, ground. It just goes on and on. I won't list the 18. Wow. And we've got a climbing wall in college, and a school climbing team, and girls football and cricket. And we had a professional Australia, New Zealand female cricketer come and spend the summer term here coaching our girls cricket. We've got girls in county level cricket. I've actually got a girl who's in the Great Britain modern pentathlon Olympic squad for the next Olympics, ranging from that down to I can barely catch a ball and everything in between. So sport actually is a wonderful, we will meet the girls where they are, and actually developing that confidence from getting a little bit fitter, and your core strength and your general athleticism getting a little bit more confident means you're then more versatile to enjoy more sport. But the emphasis nowadays is on giving you a fulfilling and positive experience, not freezing cold, pouring rain, pounding up and down a hockey field, feeling totally inadequate. Have I been too blunt, Sam?
No, you haven't. What I'm going to give, before I wrap up, so I'm mindful of time, I'd like to give Sam the opportunity, please, to gently show off about her girls and their amazing tutors as well. Sam, terribly briefly, are the things, girls at Beneden, I'm sure, are doing the same things. Anything else that's different? Anything else you'd like to show off about? Sorry, we're on mute.
You're on mute, Sam.
Is this in terms of sport or anything else?
No, just specifically about sport.
Oh, about sport. I think Eve, to be fair, has probably covered everything with sport. I think what I love about the sport here is the inclusive nature of it. So you can play sort of very elite sport to high level. We've got a lot of very sort of strong athletes, but we've got a lot of girls also sort of as they go through the school where they actually just choose to keep fit. And I suppose that goes sort of back to fitness for life. And so they may want to go spinning, they may want to go to the aerobics classes and the yoga classes. And I think the other piece I really like about it is we have a lot of matches which are girls versus staff. So we had a hockey match, funnily enough, that I was playing in last night. We had lacrosse a few weeks ago and netball, and you get the whole school who come out to support those events, and really, really fun activities. We played Tunbridge, our first team played Tunbridge on Sunday at lacrosse. We beat them hands down, really lovely match, really nice atmosphere. But they sort of showed that girls actually with the boys, the girls can be incredibly skilled, and it's not just about speed and strength. So I think there's just kind of this appetite for exercise, which they enjoy.
Thank you so much. I could keep the questions coming because we have more. I will try and answer those questions outside of the webinar. So those, thank you very much for sending them in. I'm going to wrap it up because we said an hour. Thank you so much to our two expert panelists, to obviously my partner in English education, to Pooja, but primarily to Eve, and forgive me, Eve, for describing you as a headmistress. I understand you're a principal, but you are
No
really,
problem.
I know you are. Really. And also to Sam for giving up your time. To both of you for doing it in such a constructive and well-considered way, that you are not directly selling your own schools, you are selling the concept of single-sex girls UK boarding education, which is clearly in your schools in fabulous hands. Thank you so much to the parents and others who have joined the webinar, for spending your time with us. We will, having recorded this, we will send it through to all those who've registered. We're obviously here as the English Education. If you have specific questions about school search placement, do please contact me or Pooja. And just to wish you all a happy evening or happy afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. From me, on behalf of the panel and the English Education, I'll finish it there and wish you all well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.